Have you ever woken up and realized someone who used to be close to you suddenly vanished from your life? No warning, no goodbye, just silence. Messages left unread. Conversations once filled with laughter are now only memories. And you wonder, what did I do wrong? We often assume that someone's silence is a sign of some mistake we failed to notice. But the truth is sometimes painfully quiet. Some people withdraw, not because you changed too much, but because they were never ready to face that change. In a chaotic world, the only thing we can control is ourselves, how we respond, how we hold to our values, and how we continue walking forward without losing our inner peace. This isn't a story about being loved. It's a story about not losing yourself when you're being ignored. And it all starts here. 1. They want to test their control over you. Not everyone who walks away does so out of indifference. Sometimes, silence is a move, a test, a subtle way to measure how you'll respond to their absence. They don't say goodbye. They just stop replying. They disappear without clearly exiting your life. They leave a void not painful enough to call it heartbreak, but just vague enough to make you wonder, to make you question yourself, to make you the one who seeks answers. And that is the point. They want to see how you'll try to pull them back. How long before you send another message? How long before you ask yourself what went wrong? How long before you apologize for something you're not even sure you did? When you text again, when you ask, "Are you okay?" Or, "Did I do something wrong?" The game has begun. But the problem is, only one person knows the rules. This isn't carelessness. It's control disguised as silence, and most of us don't recognize it. Because what makes someone strongest is also what makes them vulnerable: sincerity. The sincere tend to believe silence is a sign of hurt, that someone needs them, that maybe the relationship is going through a test. But manipulators know this. Nothing unsettles someone more than extended silence without explanation. You might think they've withdrawn because they need time. But look closer. Did they pull away from everyone, or just from you? Are they truly busy, or still posting stories, interacting, living their daily life just without you in it? If it's the latter, you're not being forgotten, you're being tested. This is the kind of manipulation Stoic philosophy has long warned us about. Emotional dependence is the beginning of slavery. Epictetus didn't dress it up. He said plainly, when you crave acceptance from others, you've given them the power to define your worth. A person who disappears without warning isn't asking, "Do you still care?" They're calculating, how much control do I still have over your emotions? The more you react, the more you reach out. The more you convince yourself that something needs clarification, the more power you hand over. Without saying a word, they've put you on the defensive, where you begin to reinterpret the entire relationship based solely on their silence. And the most painful part is, the more you care, the more you lose. I once watched this happen to my cousin Sarah, a kind-hearted girl who approached all relationships with sincerity. She had a best friend she trusted completely, someone who called every day for hours, sharing even the smallest details. Then suddenly, silence. No messages, no replies. Sarah texted twice, 3 times, even sent an email. Nothing. After a week, the friend reappeared, laughing like nothing had happened. When Sarah asked why, the response was, "I just wanted to see if you really cared." She recounted this with a look of disillusionment. And I told her, when someone makes you prove your love by creating insecurity, they don't need you, they need control. The Stoic doesn't react out of impulse or jump at every emotional provocation. They observe, they analyze, they stay composed. They understand that if someone can make you feel small through silence alone, that person holds an unearned power. And when you choose not to react, not to chase, not to seek validation, you regain control not just in the relationship, but within yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The greatest freedom is not being shaken by someone's presence or their absence." That doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means responding with reason, not letting your mind be dragged into psychological games. So, how do you know when someone is testing you? Watch the patterns. They retreat only when you shine, when you gain self-mastery, when you stop centering them. Notice the cycles. Every time you focus on yourself, they go quiet, as if to pull you back into orbit. And most importantly, see if they return when you don't chase. Because those who truly care won't use silence as a weapon. But manipulators, they can't stand it when you don't react. In the end, that silence no longer remains a question you have to decode, it becomes the answer. And when you learn not to respond, you stop being a puppet in someone else's emotional game. You become free, not because you won, but because you stopped playing. 2. You reveal their true nature. Not everyone who leaves does so because you did something wrong. Sometimes they vanish because you saw something they wanted to keep hidden. Not through accusations, not in confrontation. Simply because you stopped turning a blind eye. You started noticing more, asking questions you once ignored, and most importantly, you stopped being the agreeable one. And that's when the mask slips. In every relationship, friendship, or love, there's often a strange silence that follows your awakening. You no longer believe vague words. You no longer excuse poor behavior. You no longer search for reasons to keep someone around. You're no longer quick to forgive, quick to please, or easily led by counterfeit emotions. For the honest, this is no threat. But for those who hide behind charm and pretty words, it's a quiet judgment. They can't keep performing. They can't convince you of a version they themselves know is false. And rather than change, they retreat. Silent, distant, cold. Not because you hurt them, but because you made it impossible for them to keep pretending. I once heard a friend say something I'll never forget. Every time I stopped covering for someone, I realized they weren't as kind as I thought. That sentence echoes in my mind whenever someone disappears the moment I start being honest, not with them, but with myself. When you stop bending, when you say no, when you set boundaries, when you voice what you once stayed silent about out of fear of upsetting them. That's not you changing. That's you returning to who you truly are and exposing who they truly were. Epictetus taught, "Those who live by lies will always fear those who live by truth." And it's oddly true. You don't need to expose anyone. Just be real. Your presence, if grounded and clear, is enough light to strip away every shadow. And those who can't bear that light will step away on their own. I had a friend once, someone I thought would never change. She was smart, funny, kind until I started noticing a pattern. Every conflict ended with her as the victim. At first, I believed it, then I empathized. But eventually, I saw the repetition. She never took responsibility, never admitted fault. There was always someone else who had done her wrong. One day I paused mid-conversation and asked a simple question. Have you ever thought that maybe, sometimes, the problem isn't just other people? She didn't answer, but her eyes changed. And from that day, the calls became less frequent, the hangouts delayed, then silence. No argument, no goodbye. Just a quiet departure with loud meaning. I didn't feel anger. I knew it wasn't my fault. That disappearance wasn't because I hurt her. It was because I stopped being a warped mirror she could comfortably see herself in. Marcus Aurelius once said, Truth offends no one except those who live falsely. And the strange thing is this. The moment you stop lying to yourself just to keep a relationship, you begin to see it for what it really was. Not friendship, not trust, but a delicate compromise where one person hides and the other accepts that facade for the sake of connection. But once you become clear, that connection fades, because it has no foundation. They can't survive in truth, and you can't live in pretense. And, as with everything in nature, when conditions no longer support life, it dissolves. So if someone leaves the moment you start being true to yourself, don't mourn too quickly. Know that you didn't lose a person. You shed an illusion. You didn't hurt them. You just stopped helping them keep up the act. And if the truth makes someone walk away, then their walking away proves you were right to start asking questions. They couldn't stay not because you were too harsh, but because they were never strong enough to face what's real. And that's reason enough for you to walk on steadily, freely, and without looking back. 3. A gift wrapped in rejection. The silence of others often triggers a primal reflex in us. We assume we've been abandoned, cast aside, rejected, and rejection always wounds because it touches the deepest part of us, the place that longs to be seen, accepted, to exist meaningfully in someone's eyes. But the truth is, rejection is often not a slap in the face. It's a door, an opportunity to look inward and realize that those who walked away have returned something we mistakenly gave away the right to define our worth. Not everyone who stays is meant for you, and not everyone who leaves is a loss. Some people were only meant to walk a short part of the journey with you, but because you believed too deeply in the bond, you mistook them for destiny. So when they stop reaching out, stop caring, stop playing the role they once did, you feel empty. You try to fix things, you question yourself, you take the blame. But over time, you come to a simple realization: you were always the one holding on, and when you let go, nothing collapses. No one returns, no one looks for you. All that remains is a space and the truth. That space might make you tremble at first, but from it, you learn this. Real relationships are never built by one side alone. And rejection, when seen clearly, is confirmation that you don't need to force yourself to fit anyone. You only need to fit yourself. Seneca once wrote, "Sometimes what seems like misfortune is actually the best thing that ever happens to us." And he was right. When someone chooses to quietly disappear from your life, they don't just leave a void. They leave clarity. They save you time, energy, and hope. They free you from a relationship you were the only one holding on to. Through their absence, they show you that you've always been alone. You just weren't brave enough to see it. I once had a friend, and for many years, I was always the one initiating plans, checking in, holding the connection together. I never complained because I believed it's what you do when you care. But one day, I stopped. Not out of anger or to test anything, I just wanted to see if this relationship would survive without me maintaining it. And what happened was, nothing happened. No messages, no calls, no questions. That day, I wasn't as sad as I expected. I just went quiet. Because for the first time, I saw it clearly. I didn't lose a friend. I just stopped being the one keeping a dead relationship breathing. You see, when people leave quietly, they don't take anything from you. They make room. They clear out what was false so life can bring you what's real. People who won't disappear when you're silent, who don't distance themselves when you're honest, who don't stay vague when you need clarity. And you'll only recognize them if you're brave enough to release those who never deserved your grip. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be grateful even for the things that hurt you, for they give you a chance to become stronger. Rejection doesn't diminish you. It only removes what never truly belonged. And if you look closely, you'll see you weren't abandoned, you were returned to yourself. So if you're carrying the wound of being ignored, ask yourself, did you really lose something of value? Or did you just wake up from an illusion that lasted too long? Sometimes, someone leaves not to hurt you but to wake you up, to help you reevaluate what you overvalued, to teach you to distinguish between familiarity and closeness, between someone you have memories with and someone who is truly there for you. It's not failure. It's purification, a natural selection of life. Like trees shedding leaves in autumn, not because they're dying, but because they're preparing for a new cycle, stronger, deeper. And so are you. If someone walks away in silence, let them go. Not because you're cold, but because you now understand. Genuine presence never has to be forced. And true connection never begins with deliberate silence. Move on, gently, without resentment, without hoping to restore something that quietly rotted long ago. Because when someone leaves, they don't take anything from you. They just make space for growth, for peace, and for those who will come not to test you, but to walk with you. 4. You no longer play by their rules. There's a kind of rupture that doesn't come through arguments, but through silence. A sudden, familiar distance. Someone who used to call you every day now says nothing. Someone who once shared everything now becomes guarded. No blame, no clear reason, just a quiet shift, and you start to feel something's wrong but can't quite name it. The truth is, you've stopped playing by their rules. You no longer shrink yourself just to keep the peace. You no longer accept the unacceptable out of fear of upsetting them. You no longer stay silent when you know you should speak. And in that moment, the one thing that kept them attached to you disappears control. Some people don't stay in your life because of true connection, but because they're used to shaping your emotions and reactions. They're used to the version of you that always says yes, that always apologizes first, that always yields when tension rises. They don't love your kindness, they exploit it. And when you begin to stand tall, they no longer know what to do with a version of you they can't control. You did nothing wrong. You simply did what you should have done long ago. You chose self-respect over convenience. And that alone is enough to make manipulators retreat. A woman I know, Natalie, went through this in a long-term relationship. She loved him deeply, and for that love, she tried to do everything right. Never stayed angry too long, always made the first move to reconcile, always listened, even when it hurt. Until one day, she stopped. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she realized every time she softened, he stepped further over her boundaries, and when she started saying no, he vanished. No shouting, no slammed doors, just quiet withdrawal, cold and deliberate. She told me, I didn't lose him because I changed. I lost him because I stopped playing the role he was used to. That reminded me of something simple yet true, a puppet. When you cut the strings, the puppet dances no more. And when the puppeteer can no longer pull the strings, they don't try to reconnect, they leave. Not because the puppet is broken, but because it no longer feeds their power. Epictetus once said something profound. When you stop reacting the way they expect, you reclaim your freedom. That freedom isn't about winning an argument. It's about no longer needing to argue to be understood. You choose silence not out of weakness, but out of clarity, because true worth doesn't come from convincing others, but from no longer trading yourself just to stay in someone's story. And you'll notice a pattern. Those who care will learn to respect the boundaries you set. They'll adapt, they'll communicate, they'll try to understand. But those who are used to control, they won't care to understand. They'll just want you to return to who you were. And when you don't, they turn away. The hard part is not seeing their withdrawal as failure, because you can't keep both your self-respect and the relationships that only exist when you comply. Losing those relationships is actually a kind of progress, because when you stop being loved for being agreeable, you start being respected for being honest. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You don't need to prove yourself to those who refuse to understand you. Their refusal is their freedom, and your peace, that's yours." So if someone who was once close grows distant the moment you start living by your principles, don't panic. It's not a sign you're going the wrong way. It's proof you're stepping out of an invisible dependence you never realized you were trapped in. You've stopped playing by their rules. And if someone can only stay when they get to make the rules, then losing them doesn't mean you've changed. It means you've stopped tolerating an unfair game. And that is right. That is brave. That is the step of a soul growing up. 5. They were there for the benefit, not for you. The truth is sometimes not complex. We just don't want to accept it. One of the hardest truths to swallow is this: some people were never genuinely attached to you. They were attached to what you provided. Their presence wasn't born from affection, but from convenience. They didn't care for you, they simply liked the feeling of receiving from you. And when there was nothing left to take, they had no reason to stay. Maybe you were always there to listen when they needed to vent, always eager to help when they struggled. You gave your time, your advice, even your money, because you thought that's what a friend should do. But you didn't notice that when you were the one in need, they often disappeared. When you were struggling, they went silent. When you no longer had the upper hand, they lost interest. And when you began living for yourself, they left without a word. Why? Because you were no longer a source of supply. Someone once said it well: you don't truly know who cares until you have nothing left to give. In the dark, you can't tell who's sincere. But in the silence of days when you no longer serve anyone, the truth begins to show. I once knew someone like that. A friend I once believed I could trust long-term, always calling, always inviting, always close. But again and again came requests wrapped in casual talk. Help finding jobs, reviewing documents, relationship advice. At first I saw no problem. I'm the type who likes to give. But then I tried silence. I stopped texting first, stopped offering help, stopped being unconditionally available. And the result? They vanished. No questions, no curiosity. The connection evaporated as if it had never existed. That's when I understood. That relationship didn't need me. It needed what I provided. Seneca once wrote, "A wise person will not cling to things borrowed from others, nor allow others to cling to them just to take." A genuine relationship is built on mutual respect, not exploitation. And those who show up only when they need you, but disappear when you need them, they're not friends, they're consumers. And you weren't born to be an endless supply for those who only know how to take. The sad thing is, relationships based on benefit often wear convincing disguises. They're not loud, they're not blatantly selfish. They come wrapped in thank yous, compliments, sometimes even apparent closeness. But if you step back and look at the big picture, you'll notice one unchanging fact. You're the one sustaining it. You're the one investing more. You're the one carrying most of the weight. You're the giver. True friendship doesn't drain you. It's a place of strength, not depletion. And if someone is only around when you're strong, kind, or useful, they don't cherish you. They're renting you. They treat the relationship like a service, and when the service stops working, they cancel the subscription. You may feel hurt when they leave, But that pain will quickly be replaced by relief once you realize you no longer have to play the role of the ever-giving person or prove yourself worthy just to be kept around. You only need to be yourself, and those who truly care will stay. Not for what you offer, but for who you are. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, do not tie your soul to things that are temporary. And in relationships, the most dangerous kind of temporary is the one dressed as intimacy. If you feel you must always offer something just to keep someone around, then you're clinging in the wrong way. Let their departure be your liberation. Don't chase those who can't love you without a return. Let your life become a place of giving with limits and connection with discernment. Because not everyone who stayed is worth keeping, and not everyone who left is a loss. Some people leave so you can rediscover your true worth, not one rooted in blind giving, but in the clear understanding that you weren't born to serve others' needs, but to live in accordance with your own dignity. 6. They feel small when you grow. Growth is not always celebrated. In fact, it often leaves you feeling alone. Not because you became worse, but because you surpassed the boundaries others were too afraid to face. When you level up, when you shift your mindset, raise your standards, care for your inner world, and live with discipline, you don't just change yourself, you unintentionally shift the balance in your relationships. And for some, that is intolerable. Not everyone has the strength to watch someone they once stood beside rise. They don't hate you. They hate the feeling of being left behind. They won't openly resist your growth, but the distance, the withdrawal, and sometimes the vague mockery all point to one thing. They're no longer comfortable around you. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your presence reflects what they haven't done. The further you go, the more lost they feel. The more you shine, the more invisible they become. And instead of evolving, they choose the easier path, withdraw, grow cold, or worse, diminish your progress. I once had a friend we grew up together, same class, shared innocent dreams of youth, but life took us in different directions. I began reading more, exercising every morning, skipping pointless parties to focus on my work. I didn't show off, I didn't act superior, but those small changes revealed a growing gap. He started avoiding me. The once playful jokes became half-serious jabs. Getting all philosophical now, huh? Think you're better than us? Guess you're too good for our crowd these days. At first, I felt guilty. I thought I was losing a friend. But the more I reflected, the more I realized. I wasn't losing him. I just stopped holding on to an old version of myself that made him feel secure. My change didn't harm anyone, it only forced someone to face a truth they weren't ready to admit. They've stood still. Epictetus once said, "Never sacrifice your own growth to preserve someone else's comfort." Yet many of us have done exactly that, shrinking ourselves, limiting our potential, turning down opportunities just to maintain surface harmony with those no longer walking the same path. We fear that growing will make us different, and difference will isolate us. But what we need to understand is this: temporary isolation is the price of long-term elevation. You can't evolve without losing a few familiar faces. That's a natural part of growth. Like a tree reaching higher, some leaves no longer catch the same light. They fall, not because you want them to, but because you need the space to keep growing. And if someone truly loves you, they won't let your growth drive a wedge between you. They'll adjust. They'll grow alongside you, or at the very least, they'll respect your journey. But if they choose distance as soon as you improve, then it's not a loss. It's release from a bond that only existed in comfort zones. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Walk according to reason. Let others follow or fall behind. That's their path. You are not responsible for leading the world to where you go." Your growth needs no approval. It needs no company. It needs only one thing, that you don't shrink just because others won't rise. So if someone begins pulling away just as you begin to thrive, don't panic. See it as a signal not that you're moving too fast, but that they've stopped moving long ago. And if you must choose between keeping them or keeping your progress, always choose the latter. Those who are meant to walk with you will adjust their pace. Those who only stayed because you stayed the same were only there to keep you small. Don't shrink to fit someone else's outdated vision of you. Don't sit down just because they won't stand up. Keep walking, keep growing, keep becoming the best version of yourself. And remember, those who truly love you will never feel small when you rise. They'll feel inspired to rise with you. Anyone threatened by your light was never planning to stay in the first place. 7. They were influenced by others, not by the truth. Some people don't walk away because you changed, or because you did something wrong, but simply because they heard something about you from someone who barely knows you, or worse, from someone who doesn't wish you well. And instead of asking, instead of having a conversation, instead of seeking the truth, they believe it. They believe a one-sided story. They allow their image of you to be shaped by whispers behind your back, not by your honest presence in front of them. The sad truth is that not everyone has the strength to think independently. Many will choose the easier path to follow those they trust, those they know, those who feel safe. They don't verify. They don't question. They don't look at the full picture of who you've been or what you've done. All it takes is one distorted detail for them to turn away. And in that moment, you're not just misunderstood, you're replaced by a version of you created by someone else. You're still you, still living by your values, still treating others sincerely. But in their eyes, you've been redrawn by a hand that doesn't have your best interest at heart. I once witnessed this happen to a former colleague. His name was Josh, a calm, kind man who always did his part. Then one day, a competitor started spreading rumors that Josh was untrustworthy, playing office politics. No one confronted him, just a shift in glances, meetings he wasn't invited to, cold greetings. When he finally discovered what was happening and tried to explain, it was too late. They didn't need the truth, they had already chosen their belief. Epictetus once warned, "A mind untrained is easily led by things it never questioned." And it's true. Someone who's swayed by gossip isn't irrational. They're just unpracticed in thinking for themselves. And with people like that, you can't argue. You can't persuade, because they've chosen the voice over the person. So if someone distances themselves from you because of something they heard and never cared to ask you, let them go. You haven't lost someone. You've been freed from a relationship built on assumption instead of understanding. And if your truth isn't worth enough to them to survive a rumor, their place in your life was never solid to begin with. I used to think that if someone walked away from me, I must have done something wrong. But after each silence, each relationship that suddenly disappeared, I realized some distances are not consequences. They're reactions. Reactions to you no longer fitting into someone's mold of a version that's easy to control, easy to read, easy to please. And when you start living honestly, when you set boundaries, when you refuse to tolerate what's unreasonable, you don't hurt them. You just stop serving the role they had cast you in. I no longer feel pain when someone quietly withdraws. I simply observe. And I'm grateful, because their absence reveals the limits I used to hide from myself just to maintain the illusion of connection. In the end, I don't need everyone to stay. I just need the courage not to hold on to those who only accepted me when I stayed small. And that is a form of freedom, a form of growth, a peace that cannot be bought. If this video spoke to something within you, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next content. And remember, true peace doesn't come from keeping everyone around. It comes from knowing who's truly worth inviting to stay. See you in the next video.